Welcome to Mr. Chalk's Revision Tips.
When answering exam questions, there are a few key things to remember, right? So just remember, exam technique is a key part in preparation for any exams, and it's something that you'll pick up the more you go and you do past papers. Right, so many questions in exams are repeats of what will be in old exams. So going and looking at lots of generic questions beforehand is a good idea. When going and answering and questions and reading them, there's a few things just take into account. Make sure you go read the question at least twice so you don't make any mistakes when you're reading them. As you're reading them, go highlight key information. Don't make assumptions about what the question's asking. Make sure after you've answered it, you go check your work for daft errors that you might make. And if it involves going and answering something where there's some calculation, make sure that you write your workings out down. Right, let's go and have a look at the question.
When answering questions on biodiversity, we've first kind of got to go and consider what biodiversity is and some of the key things that kind of relate to it. So remember that biodiversity forms the foundation of various ecosystems. Remember that having a large or a high amount of biodiversity is relatively important. And remember that we can go and make decisions which affect the biodiversity in the world. So we're looking at why biodiversity is important. Right, remember that biodiversity is important for a number of reasons. So it helps maintain the stability of different ecosystems as each species goes and plays a unique role within that ecosystem. So biodiversity also provides us with a wide range of resources such as food, medicine, etc. If we're looking at how biodiversity affects ecosystems, some of the key things to go and talk about, like we've said, is that they provide stability, or a high level of biodiversity provides stability and resistance to change within that ecosystem. So ecosystem can better respond to changes such as climate change or a new species, etc., if there's a high level of biodiversity. There are a number of different types of biodiversity. So we can have species biodiversity, we can have diversity of ecosystem, and we can have diversity within the genes within a particular area. So when we talk about diversity of species, we're talking about the variety of species within a given area. If we're talking about diversity of ecosystems, we're talking about the variety of habitats within that area. And the diversity of genetic genes is just talking about the variety of genetic makeup within a particular species. So in the little picture below, you might have one or more different species of, I don't know, frogs, for instance. There are a number of different causes that we could go and have to biodiversity loss, so decrease in biodiversity. So things like pollution, so that could be man-made, habitat loss, so where we're going and cutting down too much. Right, overhunting or overpredation, so we're physically going and hunting the organisms in there. Introduction of an invasive species that might go and kill the organisms that are already there. Over exploitation, so when you're overfishing, then you've got things like climate change, and finally things like natural disasters can go and decrease biodiversity. And some of the main ways that biodiversity loss can be prevented, so we can go and we can conserve it. We can go and physically prevent any further loss of biodiversity by putting in laws or something like having fishing quotas. Or we can go and create things like national parks where biodiversity within that park will be protected. So we're just going to go and have a quick look at an example of a question that looks at biodiversity. So in this question, it talks about the Scottish wildcat and the European wildcat are both classified as the same species. So researchers have suggested that both types of wildcat originated, so came from, the same population. So during the Ice Age, the British Isles were connected to the mainland of Europe. Right, so this is going to really be talking about something to do with geographic isolation, thinking about that. So after the Ice Age, the sea levels rose, so the British Isles became isolated from the rest of Europe. This isolated population of wildcats in the British Isles developed slightly differently, or slightly different characteristics from the mainland population. So a subspecies is a group of individuals that is geographically isolated from the others of the same species and that are distinguishable, so you can tell the difference, from other populations of that same species. So the Scottish wildcat is now classified as a subspecies. So by the 19th century, the wildcat population in the British Isles had decreased, etc. So we've got quite a lot of information to go out there, but it's really important that when you've got that amount of information that you read through it properly. So current estimates of the Scottish wildcat vary. Recent reports by the Scottish Wildcat Association indicate that fewer than 100 individuals, right, so if it's talking about a low number of individuals, you're going to be looking at how you can go and protect them, kind of they're left in the wild. So 35 of these were going to go and be moved to an uninhabited island in the Highlands. So if we're evaluating the scientists' conclusions with reference to genetic and biodiversity, so how this plan is going to go and reduce the loss of biodiversity. If we start off just by looking at species biodiversity, so you want to talk about the fact that wildcats, if they're left to their own devices, might go extinct. So if they go extinct, there'll be one less species. If you're lowering the amount of species, you're lowering species richness, right, or species evenness. Form of prey, in that case, might increase, which would have a knock-on effect to the food chains. So therefore, conservation efforts are quite important. Right, so they are all kind of the reasons when we're looking at species biodiversity. If we're now going to look at genetic biodiversity, so remember, genetic biodiversity will go and decrease if they go extinct, because, well, you're removing one. However, if you go and keep all of those 35 wildcats in one place, that will also decrease the genetic biodiversity, right? Because you're getting a small gene pool, so there'll be fewer alleles, right? So the proportion of polymorphic loci, so positions of genes on a chromosome, will be low. That will due to inbreeding, and inbreeding will also go and cause other problems, because related cats or closely related cats will go and breed together. So you could have loss of alleles. There's a chance that you could go and lower genetic diversity by genetic drift, etc., which might make them more susceptible to different diseases. So you're lowering the potential for adaptations to occur. So hopefully you have found that useful. If you've got any questions, then drop it in the comments below, and we'll be uploading a lot more. Right, good luck, folks.